Hey guys, welcome to this edition of the Cover One Buffalo matchup show. Got week 5 ramped up for you guys after another tough Buffalo Bills weekend loss. I got my businessman here tonight, Greg Thompson. All businessman. It's on from Green Bay and straight on to Tennessee, huh?
When you lose, you got to get serious. You got to get your head right, back to business. That's what I'm here for.
That's right. I like it. Let's get down to some business here tonight. Before we get into the business here, I want to get it out of the way and just talk to you guys a little bit real quick about cover1.net. We talk about it every time. If you're coming here, you probably already know about it and the quality of content that the guys that are writing put out. Obviously, Greg and I are on the podcast a lot, so you know the quality of the content there is top notch in the podcast.
Clearly.
Right. But the quality of content that they put out is totally top notch. Eric, if you're not following Cover One Twitter handle, you got to get on there. Some of the gems that he posts really educate me every week about what the Bills are doing and what's going wrong. And I think with a lot of the narrative pushing out there right now on Twitter and on Facebook and all the places where you're just seeing certain things just pushed as a narrative, I think Eric does a really good job of taking the fan lens off and taking the negative lens off and just letting the play and the tape tell the story of what's happening with this team. And so I think he's worth a follow. And so head over to cover1.net, take a look at the premium memberships over there. $25 gets you premium access for the entire year. And Greg and I are both premium members, and we're in the Slack channel. And Greg can tell you a little bit more about the Slack channel because I know that's probably your favorite feature, right?
It really is. I mean, it's great to have people who, we give each other a hard time. We have fun. It's awesome during the games. I think that people really want to have intelligent discussion on things, want to be able to interact with people, that they're looking to get a little bit more than just the crazy banner that you get on Twitter or and Facebook and get down some of those rabbit holes. So I think people really enjoy it. And I feel very confident in saying we have the best Brazilian goalie Bills coverage in the world, which is something you don't get everywhere. I'm half joking, but Fernando is actually a Brazilian goalie in playing football, soccer down there, and has just unbelievable insight on what he does here. So it's great to get an outside view on things, and the content is fantastic.
It is. And Fernando also is the host of a podcast, a Bills podcast in Brazil. So if you speak Spanish, if you're fluent and you're looking for that, go over and check Fernando out. He's got that on lockdown. So definitely a very talented team. I could just talk about it all day about the talent that's at the cover1.net. And it's not just Bills. There's some other stuff and getting ready for the draft. But I want to talk about the Titans because as bad as it's been here, sludging through this first 4 weeks of the season, we're a quarter through the season, 1-3, some of the worst losses in the NFL, some of the worst losses in my lifetime as a Bills fan, except for that stretch last year was pretty bad too. But some of the worst quarterback play we've seen in God, long as I can remember. I have no reason to be optimistic right now, but here I am going up against a 3-1 team. And I feel a sense of optimism when I look at this roster. Not that I think that the Bills are going to come out and really dominate the team, but I think this is a game that you look at what the Titans have done so far this year, and they've allowed teams to hang around. They themselves have just kind of hung around in games, close games. And that, to me, seems to be the kind of game that the Bills want to get into with somebody to maybe get another win under the belt, or at least just have a close game, because it's been either blowouts against or blowouts for a blowout for so far for the Bills. How do you feel? Do you have any optimism right now?
I do. I think honestly, there's a ton of similarities in the team, and I really see this as being almost a few years ahead of realistically where the Bills are. We talk a lot about the Eagles. We talk about the Rams. We talk about even the Jags, the Bears. Really, I think that there's probably a little more realism in the Titans. You're talking about a top number 1 overall pick from a quarterback standpoint, a smaller market where they're not going to lure a ton of free agents just on glitz and that kind of draw to it. You're talking about they took the right approach. I actually love the way that they built their team with first-round picks right afterwards. They went a tackle and a running back with Conklin and Derrick Henry the next year after Mariota. Then the year after that, they went Corey Davis and Taywan Taylor in the first and third, and Jonnu Smith, the tight end, in the third. So I'm kind of hopeful that's the way that we're looking to build our team, and that kind of tough, gritty coach. I think Vrabel and McDermott have a fair amount of similarities. So I think that my optimism is they like to get into these muddy, gritty, tough matchups and are hoping they can just eke out close wins, which obviously at 3-1, they're 3-1, but they're like 75 points for and 70 or 77 points for, 75 points against. I think they have like a +2 point differential at 3-1. That's the kind of game we can squeak out. So I think that we're going to be competitive. I think we're going to be a part of it. And if we get a couple of things to bounce our way, I think it's a game that we could steal.
Yeah, no, for sure. And real quick here, let's get into the injury report coming up, because obviously that plays a big factor in all these games coming up right now. We'll start with the Bills. Since McDermott's come in, I don't know if it has to do with the new training staff that he brought in with him or what, but the previous years prior to his regime, I felt like the Bills just really struggled with the injury bug consistently from training camp throughout the season. And really right now, as far as the battle of attrition goes, the Bills have done a good job, knock on wood, of not that you can do a good job. Obviously, it's a lot of it's luck, but injuries haven't been a huge issue for this team. Obviously, Micah Hyde with the groin week to week. Who knows with those things? That could take quite a long time to recover. He could be back in a couple of weeks. We don't know. We'll play that one by ear. I'm assuming that he is a no-go for this week. If groin issues usually aren't coming right back that next week. If it is, he's probably likely to hurt that again. So I'm assuming Micah Hyde's out, but that's it on the Bill side right now until Taron Johnson makes a tackle.
I would say, yeah, man, I love him, and Eric loves him. Eric keeps getting excited every time he does more film breakdown, but man, his tenacity and physical style seems to not mix with his body type. So we'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, Hyde's really the first real injury that we've had so far this year. Shaq Lawson even came back. It sounds like Phillip Gaines might be coming back here. So we've actually had some pretty good fortune to this point that, hopefully that can give us at least a full complement of players to work with. So I will say, more so than it being the groin, which you never know the severity, reading between the lines of McDermott's speech, anytime he uses the term week to week, it almost always means that player is going to be out that game. Not automatic to translate there, but I'm assuming he wouldn't have used the term week to week if it wasn't something that they didn't see being this week plus more.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. We look over at the Titans, and we had another week-to-week there. Wesley Woodyard with a shoulder injury. I don't know any of the details on that, but he did show up on their injury report as a week-to-week. I did see somewhere where there's a chance that he could play this week. We had Kenny Vaccaro with the elbow injury, also week-to-week, but everything I'm reading is he will not be playing this week. So I'm going to go ahead and rule with that. You have the backup quarterback Garrett with a concussion. As we talked about the last episodes, concussions typically linger through at least 1 week. So we won't see Gabbert in any spot up duty. I'm guessing if this is a blowout, either way. And that's it I got. Do you got anyone else?
I think you covered everything I saw. Obviously, Mariota, I think, is for sure going to play, but has still had some of those lingering issues with his grip from the elbow.
Like a nerve damage.
Yeah, and that's why he's playing with the glove. And I think I saw reports he was still practicing with the glove today to help fix the grip. His pinky and ring finger, he was having trouble getting grip on the ball. I know from what I saw last week, Wesley Woodyard went out the second play of the game and was out the rest of the game. But it sounds like he has a pretty good chance to play. And you're right, Vaccaro sounds like it's 3 to 4 weeks from what I'm reading. He's definitely out. And that's interesting because that's already their second safety. He was signed, I think, after week 1. So they're going to be fairly thin there in the strong safety area.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we'll start on the offensive side of the ball and kind of head over to the defense like we typically do in these shows. You mentioned him. We're coming out of the break when they took him with the number one pick, Mariota, a guy that I want Bills fans to realize this is part of that argument that we're having about the development of a quarterback. I don't think Bills fans could handle what Titans fans have been through with the expectation that came with Mariota and the product that they've received. Up until this point, obviously, they were a playoff team last year and 3-1, but he's really hasn't shown or lived up to the pick that he was. But that is okay because he's actually shown to be a decent quarterback who you can win games with. And really, that's the floor that you're looking for with that pick. You don't want him to be a total bust. I don't think he has been a total bust, but imagine Bills fans having to have that high of a pick and not have that success immediately. I think they would lose their minds.
Yeah, I mean, we spend enough time on Twitter today, seeing people's reactions to things. I think that it's pretty tough to see the roller coaster, because there certainly have been some highs, but besides the injuries, he's also had some weird lows. He's had some really rough stretches. I think people saw going from 2016 into 17, people were expecting a huge step forward and big breakout. And he disappointed pretty much across the board last year. Now, he still had a really strong playoff game and was there despite some injuries. So again, showed the glimmers and the hope of being that franchise quarterback. And I know so far this year, their fans are hugely supportive of him, but it certainly hasn't been a smooth, steady ride to this point.
No, and obviously some of that's going to be relying on weapons. I think he's starting to see some of those weapons that, like you said, that they drafted over the years come to fruition. Obviously, we had our own weird thing with Vontae Davis leaving in halftime of a game, which is definitely unprecedented. Just a week ago, they had their own weird thing where couple weeks into the season, Rashad Matthews says, you know what, you guys aren't using me, I don't want to be here anymore, is released, not even offered in a trade. Just the team said, you know what, you don't want to be here, we don't want you. Good riddance. Hasn't been picked up yet, but it still appeared to be a big loss for the team, at least on paper. People, we're talking about who's going to step up in that role. And at least last week, Corey Coleman, I think, really maybe took that Matthews leaving and said, you know what, I'm going to come in and be the guy that you drafted me to be. They got Tajay Sharp and Coleman. I think that's actually for the future with that quarterback. I think that's a nice group. And offensively, obviously we have Trey White, so I'm not totally worried about one of them beating us, but that's not the worst combo we've seen this year at wide receiver.
Yeah, Corey Davis is a huge physical specimen.
Sorry, Davis, Coleman.
He's back in the news again. I think he got released from the Patriots practice squad, so it's fresh in people's minds. But Corey Davis is legitimately your Julio Jones, AJ Green, your prototypical 6'4", 210 physical specimen that kind of disappointed for me. I mean, he was a 4th overall pick. That's a huge investment in a wide receiver. Was kind of disappointing last year, and then had an explosive playoff game, had a huge breakout there. And then this year started out a little bit slower and then was a monster last week. So that was in Philadelphia. That's with a strong defense. He really stepped up. So it's something we have to be concerned with, but he's not someone that I feel like has the technical skill to beat Trey. Trey White is a fantastic corner, and every once in a while you get a really good tactician like a Devontae Adams last week, who used his footwork and setup to get open on him a couple times. So I feel like being someone that's the same age as Trey, the same draft class, is someone that he can handle. And then honestly, although I like Taywan Taylor out of the slot, I think Tajay Sharp is a solid player. They're not people who necessarily strike fear into my heart that we can't possibly keep up with. The same way they're tight ends. Luke Stocker is your stereotypical blocking tight end, not a weapon, but can catch. Jonnu Smith is your high-end athlete, maybe more of a Jason Kroom, Logan Thomas, but if he hands, he had a huge 3rd down drop last week that the fans were really tearing him up for. So, I think that Corey Davis is a concern, but the rest of the wide receivers, I think, have some promise and potential, but aren't necessarily anyone I'm terribly afraid of.
Yeah. Do you think this week, and this was something I was kind of wrestling with in my head, we've faced more traditional number 1 receivers so far this year, where Trey shadowed those guys. Some guys that are possibly all pros, definitely some Pro Bowl level talent receivers going into this game. While Davis has stepped up and sometimes, and shown flashes, he hasn't proven that in the league. Is he a guy that you see Trey following all day, or are they just going to kind of let Trey do his thing and wherever guys line up, that's where it is?
That's a good question. I would lean towards my initial assumption was that he would shadow him, and that was more not from his capability, but more so his prominence in the offense. So last week, you're talking about 15 targets out of the 30 receptions, 30 catches that were out there. So almost double any other receiver. There were a couple with 8 or 9 that were in there, but a sizable gap. So he obviously plays a huge role in that offense that I would say it would be the most disruptive to then use Trey to shut him down, even if it's not necessarily required, simply because of his capability and skill set.
No, for sure. Yeah. Honestly, here, the thing that scares me the most about this offense isn't going to be the passing game. I think last week they attacked the Eagles through the air specifically because they felt like they couldn't really run the ball against the Eagles. The Eagles are a very stout run defense team, so I understand that. So they took the chance of going through the air against them, even though they are good in the pass game as well. Ends up working out. I think they're going to look at this Bills team and see some opportunities to run the ball with that two-headed monster they have. Obviously, Henry has not gotten off to how he finished last year, which I think a lot of Tennessee fans would probably say there's some disappointment because he was a beast at the end of the year last year. He might be that kind of running back with that frame and that style that he runs with that just gets better as the year goes on, the more touches he gets, and weather starts to get colder, the game starts to slow down and go gravitate towards the run a little more. So you might see him kind of just come along slowly every year, but he seems to me the kind of running back that always hurts the Bills consistently, where, he's had a couple bad games, but the potential is there. He's a big guy. He's hard to bring down. There's going to be some holes for him. And then a guy that terrifies me that I don't think gets enough love around the league at all is Dion Lewis. He is a very special running back. I think he just got lost in the shuffle of the plethora of New England running backs that Belichick, he just fits another person in there. But I think Lewis was the exception to the rule in Green Bay, and that he actually had a lot of special talent and wasn't just a plug into the New England system. And so far he's shown that.
No, and you saw that in New England in that he became a true featured back for them down the stretch last year and was one of the Patriots fans and podcast people's biggest concerns in being able to replace them. Derrick Henry is, like you said, your prototypical battering ram. Those huge games that he had last year often started pretty slow and would be a lot of 15 carries for 32 yards midway through the third quarter. And then all of a sudden they have a lead and start pounding him. And then he breaks the 75-yarder later on because you're just worn down. So they haven't had any of those game scripts. Most of their wins have been really close games or comebacks that they've had to claw their way back into the game. Like they were down 17-3 to Philadelphia last week. So Lewis has had more run and more snaps to this point. He's obviously the bigger play in the passing game and a very elusive, strong receiver out of the backfield. And then actually is very deceiving in his running ability, whether that's up the middle or after the catch. So he's someone that we have to be concerned with, but depending on game script, I think is going to dictate who we see and where we see more of it. If they jump out to a lead, we're going to have that risk of seeing that battering ram wearing us down. And hopefully we could avoid that. But I think that it's logical that they paid a lot of money to Dion Lewis. He got a huge contract and they're getting their value from him.
Yeah, and we saw last week, there's not a lot of big names over on the Packers running game, but I felt like the Packers did a really good job. Just, people said that their offense didn't do a lot, but once they got up in a lead, their backs did a good job just keeping the chains moving throughout the game and getting that clock running. And that's what scares me right now about the Titans. If they jump ahead, we obviously know that the Bills aren't a team built to come back from even, 10-point deficit. So if they can get ahead of the Bills in any way and then really establish the run game with those two running backs, I think that plays against the Bills' weaknesses a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, as far as being able to just, maybe they're not going to score a lot of points that way, but just enough to move the ball, keep the clock running, and get the Bills worn down a little bit. What do you think? Do you think that's going to be the strength of this team offensively when you're looking at them, or do you think they're going to be able to beat us up with a complementary offense?
I think it's certainly going to be their plan is to run the game. I think that they absolutely see this as the opportunity to get Derrick Henry reestablished. Now, I'm hopeful that's not going to be the case. I think that we've actually seen a deceivingly strong run defense to this point, even though they had a lot of overall yards last week. We held the Packers to 3.8 yards a carry. We obviously had that Vikings game that they couldn't get anything going there. So we've actually played, and even in the blowouts that we did get beat pretty badly, there were a lot of short fields, and there wasn't actually a ton of running success from Baltimore or LA. So I feel like we're pretty well suited to slow that down, but I absolutely assume that they're going to be looking for that, and that although they showed last week they can put up yards, at Mariota there was 340 yards, probably close to a career high for him. They certainly are going to be trying to establish the run here against us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if the only maybe kink in the armor that they can see in the secondary, obviously, we're not sure what Gaines is going to be doing. And Lewis, while he graded well at PFF, which was a shock to me that he graded well on an individual basis on PFF this week, Rodgers was picking on him. So that side of the defense, there's some possible targets for Mariota, and obviously not having Hyde. That's going to be a big loss, and how they replace him for a full game. So there's definitely a couple kinks in the Bills that they can exploit and do something with the offensive side of the ball. But as far as their skill position weapons, man, I look at it and I say, you know what, the gamut that this team is, the Bills have been through, that their weapons really outside of Dion Lewis, he scares me. He legitimately scares me what he can do and break out big plays. But the rest of them don't terrify me compared to what the Bills have already been through to this point in the season. For sure. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's much less of a concern. Although I will say it might be the best offensive line we played so far.
Okay, yeah, I want to get into that. What are your thoughts there?
So I mean, they simply have invested legitimate money in draft picks and not whiffed. So, you talk about Taylor Lewan, first round pick back in 2014, is a franchise left tackle. They just gave a huge chunk of money. He technically might be the highest paid left tackle in the NFL right now. I think it was right there. If somebody didn't get renewed afterwards, it always changes depending on who signed the contract last. They drafted Jack Conklin in the first round of 16. So now you're talking about a guy who is a strong tackle, but only has to be a right tackle because you have a franchise guy on the left side. They paid good money to Ben Jones from Houston at their center. They've got a couple kind of plug and play guys at guard with Quentin Spain and Josh Klein. But when you have strong tackles and a really good center, you're able to plug and play like that. So, I think that they have a really strong offensive line overall, and the two best tackles overall that we've played. Bakhtiari is a fantastic pass blocker. I think that Taylor Lewan's probably a better overall player. The combination of run and pass, he's almost as good at pass and probably better in the run, and has probably the biggest nasty streak of any franchise left tackle that's out there right now. He plays angry and tough, and someone that is certainly going to give us everything we can handle going into the game.
Yeah, and that's not a good sign for the Bills, who struggled a week ago to get pressure on Rodgers until they really started sending some blitz packages his way. That's when you started to see some hits get in on the guy. And so that doesn't play really well for the Bills. Do you think in order to get some pressures on still young Mariota, a guy that has this injury going on, you're going to want to pressure him? Do you think that they're going to have to get into that more aggressive that we saw in the second half of San Diego, that we saw against the Vikings? Do we have to get back into that mode of playing, or are they going to be able to play the bend but don't break and just say, you know what, we're probably not going to get a lot of pressure against this line, but we're going to rely on our linebackers and defensive backs to keep everything in front of them? What would your strategy against a team like this be?
I think that you've got to shake it up and mix it up more than we did last week. I think last week that we had a combination, but it was still two completely separate strategies, where the first 2.5 quarters of the game, there was almost no additional pressure. It was all four linemen, and we let Bakhtiari negate Jerry Hughes, and we know what kind of domino effect Jerry Hughes can have on the rest of the defensive line. Then we go into later in the half, and then the second half, we start throwing a ton of pressure at Rodgers, and it starts working, and things are going well. I'd love to see them switch that up. I'd love to see them, position with some A-gap pressure and then pull the guys back, and then on the next time, bring it and go. You saw some of the secondary blitzes get home. You saw that, we had sacks from Saran Neal and Taron Johnson. So I'd love to see a mix of that pressure. I'd love to see them threaten Tremaine Edmonds in an A-gap blitz and send that big body up the middle. So I'm hoping that they mix it up, because I think if we try to just go our normal 4 guys only every single play, I think we're going to play into their strength and allow their offensive line to really, negate what we have there. I think if we play around with it, you don't know who's going where. I'd love to see them switch it up and send Jerry Hughes after Conklin and let Murphy and Shaq in the rotation go after Lewan. So I'd love to see a little bit of a shakeup there, just to try to maximize what we can, because if we just try to go standard 4 guys against their 5, I think that we're going to be in trouble.
No, I totally agree with that. And what I think, and this is totally anecdotal, not based on any stats or anything like that. But I think when you're playing, coming back home after a tough stretch like they've had here to start the season, I really think they have to come out and be very aggressive early against the Titans to get this crowd in the game, because the crowd's not going to be, there's going to be people just drinking to excess because they're not going to watch the game right now, just because how bad the Bills have been. So you really are going to have to do something special to get this crowd in the game, to get them on your side early. And to me, that comes with aggressive plays on the defense and making something special happen to really get this crowd in the game early, because they're going to need that in a game, especially if it's going to be a close battle. You want to establish that early and get everybody kind of amped up that, hey, we're here to play and we're going to get aggressive with you, and not just sit back and wait for you to make mistakes.
It's funny you brought that up. I was doing a little bit of the homework prepping for today and listening to some Tennessee Titans podcasts and going through. It's funny how often they kept bringing up the lack of a home field advantage. They actually thought that during the Eagles game last week, it was like 60-40 Eagles fans, and they were much louder and more engaged. So I don't know that we're going to have necessarily that presence, but it's early in the year. Nashville is a nice trip. I could see a lot of Bills fans that were trying to make that trip or live down in that area, and now you're a little bit closer and want to be able to go catch a game. So I'd love to see a loud presence that can maybe negate some of those things. Or if we jump out to any lead, not a big lead, but say we just score first, it sounds like it's very possible to take their fans out of the game. So I'd love to see us get that going and try to help out Elam and give him a chance to really feel decent about what's going on.
Yeah, because I've always heard that Bills fans down that way, when you start to get around that Mason-Dixon line, a lot of transplants are that way. So a lot of those games end up being 60-40 type games. And you saw it last year. I was at Carolina, and you saw it, and it was probably a 60-40 crowd in Carolina last year. So definitely can lose, flip the home field advantage, if you will. We're like talking like special teams here. Flip it for us. So let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. And because I think the player that scares me the most on this entire team is on the defensive side of the ball, and it's Jurrell Casey.
He's a bad man.
He's a big, nasty man. He did work to us. What was it, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
Played the Titans 3 years ago. Chasing Tyrod Taylor down out of the pocket, scarfing him up like a hungry shark. I still have nightmares of that, and I don't know if he's still the player he was 3 years ago. I think that he is, and that terrifies me with what the line was able to give up with pressure up the middle. John Miller terrifies me if he has to go one-on-one with him at all. I just don't feel good about that matchup across our interior line whatsoever. Talk me out of it. Talk me down, calm me back down.
I wish I had better news for you. Yeah, I mean, he's 28. He's still in his prime, maybe towards the end of it, but still right smack in the middle of it. And he is a disruptive force. I think if he played for a bigger market team, we'd hear him, not necessarily in the Aaron Donald, Fletcher Cox class, but he's right there in that next tier of the most disruptive, three technique defensive tackles that are out there. He can penetrate, he can hold his ground, he can disrupt your entire game plan, and he's not enormous. I mean, that's crazy to say for someone who's 6'1", 305, but he's not your Jordan Phillips that the Bills picked up on waivers today. That's a 6'6", 348 defensive tackle, or even a Star Latuile kind of guy, 330, 340. He is quick. He penetrates. He's honestly not that far off of a Kyle Williams in Kyle's prime. He's that kind of penetrating, disruptive force that we definitely have to be concerned about. And the rest of their line is solid as well. Benny Logan, Daquan Jones, they have some players on there that hold their own, and they run that traditional 3-4 style, where it's really three defensive tackles, really more than a defensive end, but they're able to be disruptive and move things around, and they certainly use it well.
Yeah, no, I think that they're going to do a pretty good job. I think what benefits the Logan, Benny, and Jones, or Benny, Logan, and Jones, is the dominating play of Casey.
Yeah.
So much attention goes there that, you have to allow those other guys to play a little bit free. I think it's going to take double teams on Casey all day, and I don't even think that's going to really make an impact. You almost have to run away from him, which isn't a good sign for any offense when you go into a game when you have to kind of play around somebody. You don't really want to have to go into a game and do that. That's the kind of impact player he is. But behind those guys, I gotta say, I don't like to say that I'm not scared of something, and the linebacking core, and maybe I'm missing something here, but it does not terrify me what they have behind those guys in the linebacking core. Will Compton was a guy that came in to Buffalo, didn't end up signing here with us. I think he's okay. I was not mad that he didn't end up signing with the Bills. I think he's a decent player, a good tackler. He probably would have fit well here. Arakpo is a guy that definitely can do some things, has had some injury history, but he doesn't terrify me really. I don't know. Am I missing something here with these linebackers?
I would say at the high end, no. Maybe we're underestimating the depth a little bit. The fact that Woodyard got dinged up and they really didn't skip a beat. You have your first and second round pick from this year. You have Rashaan Evans out of Alabama is there and has really taken over for Will Compton and is basically now the starting inside linebacker. Played I think almost all the snaps. Jayon Brown is actually pretty good and played really well for them. He played every single snap last week. So the combination of Derek Morgan and Harold Landry on one outside and then Arakpo on the other, that you're talking about some solid pass rush ability there. Not superstars, not double. Arakpo, I think, had a double-digit sack season a couple years back, but not anything that's going to strike fear into the hearts of the linemen. But they're solid, but they actually have a pretty solid rotation. So they have a lot of depth. They can move guys in there, keep fresh bodies in there. They run their outside linebackers basically like defensive ends. They're pass rushing the vast majority of the time, and they'll maybe drop out here or there in coverage. And then in the middle, you're talking about Compton. If Woodyard plays, Jayon Brown and Rashaan Evans, all four of them are probably slightly above average. All four of them are so I think even when they lose a starter, they're still above average, solid guys, but no one's terrifying. They don't have any Luke Kuechly that's going to chase you down sideline to sideline. So, someone that I would feel good if Shady got in open space one-on-one, someone that I think Chris Ivory can lay the lumber to, but they isn't going to embarrass themselves. And I think Vrabel set up a really steady defense that they can make solid plays, keep them in front of them. And you've seen that in their game plan so far. They've played some pretty tight, close games.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to Casey for me. If you have a solid to, adequate linebacker behind a guy like that, they're gonna shine in that he's taken up so much of the offensive line that it really frees things up for those linebackers. I did like Evans and Harold in the draft process. I didn't really see Harold Landry as a outside linebacker, but you're saying that they're using more of a pass rushing, which is that I thought he was primarily a hand in the dirt pass rushing guy. So it's good to see that they're using him in that way. I didn't think that he would get a lot of playing time right away, but you're saying he was. So those are definitely things to keep an eye on. I think at this point with the offensive line, even though they're grading well, I think that with Mills, the way he's playing, and Miller, that almost anyone's a threat in both the run and pass game to make plays and have free tackles on either runners or quarterbacks at this rate against the Bills. So two guys that Bills fans are going to be very comfortable with seeing and have seen quite a bit of are going to be Logan Ryan and Malcolm Butler. How has this tandem that we're so used to seeing for the last 5 years in New England, how are they holding up over there in Tennessee?
It's been rough. It's been rough. Statistically, Malcolm Butler is the worst cornerback in the NFL through 4 games. I think it's something crazy. Like he's given up 17 catches on 20 targets, 370 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's rough. So their secondary looks awesome on paper. So Kevin Byard is one of the most underrated players in the NFL, was all pro last year, basically unheard of. Logan Ryan looks great. Malcolm Butler looks great. Adoree Jackson, another number 1 pick from a couple years ago. So they have a lot on paper. It hasn't necessarily all come together. They've given up some big plays. Miami beat them in week 1 on big plays. Alshon Jeffrey ate them alive last week. So it's something that sadly, because of our receiving core, they're probably good enough to make some plays against us, but it's someone that it's certainly something we should be able to take advantage of with a big play here or there, some double moves. If we can get some things going, I think there's potential for it.
Yeah, and if there's a game to bounce back, if you're a bad secondary, if there's a game to bounce back, it's against the Bills and their 32nd ranked passing attack. But maybe this is also a good game for the Bills to really bounce back and assert themselves and kind of get those numbers rolling again in the passing game. I do think a Malcolm Butler type guy is a great example of how good I hate to get off on a tangent about the Patriots, but how good of a coach defensively Belichick is, because he demanded all that money. They made it through the Super Bowl without him. Obviously they lost, but they played pretty well without him. And they let him go, and they're not really missing a beat without him as far as their quarterback play. And from what you're saying over here, he's not looking so good right now with the Titans. So I think that knowing when to get let go of those players, even though they've had success in your system before, isn't the worst thing ever. So definitely some holes on this defense for the Bills to attack. Problem is the Bills have had a tough time attacking wet paper bag. So
yeah, my concern comes in not necessarily from the talent and player standpoint. I think that Vrabel is a head coach and Dean Pease is a defensive coordinator, and Josh Allen seeing another 3-4 kind of amoeba alignment there where you're not sure who's coming and what direction they're going. That's where more of my concern comes in than who the actual players are, other than Casey. Is that I'm worried about their scheme being able to throw enough things at us to make it difficult.
Yeah, but as we saw, stuff was open, right? Zay Jones had a couple breaks. Things were open, and what we're obviously hoping here is for that incremental progress. He saw the film, he saw what he did. This might be a perfect opportunity, like you said, for that kind of amoeba scheme to come back up again and show, hey, you know what? I learned from last time. I'm not going to get out of the pocket when I don't need to. But we'll see. Maybe he reverts right back into the same quarterback we saw last week, and we have to deal with that all week on Twitter. But maybe he learns from it a little bit. And I don't think in a game like this, I don't think we need Josh Allen to come out and be lights out, but I think we need him to hit that Zay Jones every once in a while, get the offense moving in a direction. It just seemed to, there was a couple drives, they had some momentum and it just stalled out because of the lack of blocking, quarterback play, wide receiver play. So if you can just maintain that 1-2 plays in a drive to get things rolling, just to get some points on the board, I think that's all you need in a game like this, is to keep getting into field goal range or whatever, just get enough points to keep it close. And then I think, like you said before the show started, let a play break your way.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be big. Like you said, Allen said all the right thing in his press conference today. He said all the right things after the game. I think that we saw some painful all 22 film of things where there were some really open players that if we could have hit on one of those, it completely changes things. We don't need Josh Allen to be prime Peyton Manning and tearing everybody apart, but we do need him to hit one of those reads early on, just to keep the offense or the defense honest, just to keep them on their toes, to know that, hey, he can make some of those plays. So that way, then I think from our side, this absolutely is a game that we're going to see trying to reestablish Sean McCoy, get him a couple more touches, get our offense going, get it to the point where we can let Chris Ivory wear them down a little bit. So in order to do that, we just need it not to be 9 and 10 guys in the box. We'll live with 8 in the box. I think we're going to have 8 in the box a lot. But if we can get 1 or 2 up the seam, get one of those reads early that Allen makes the right call, then all of a sudden I think that we can get to the point where we have a little bit of room and can get some of that going with Shady. Yeah,
and all I'm asking for is to stay in this game, because like we've seen, they've been blown out, and then they had the reverse in Minnesota where they blew a team out. So it's been a very polarizing team, maybe the most polarizing team in the NFL right now. But the blowouts are driving me a little bit nuts, and so I don't need, for my satisfaction, when I came on the show early and said I'm optimistic about this game, I wasn't saying I'm optimistic the Bills are going to come in and win this game by 14 points. My optimism is that they might be able to hang into this and lose by 10 or lose by, but have a close game. And that's all I need. And I think you just hit it on the head of all the things that they need to do to just keep this close. But is there any way you see, and how do you see it, where the Bills can come in and win this game?
I absolutely think so. I think that they don't have game-breaking weapons on offense. I think they have some good players. We talked about Deion Lewis. We talked about Corey Davis's potential, but they don't have crazy game break. They don't have a Todd Gurley. They don't have a Julio Jones. They don't have some game-breaking talent that we just can't possibly touch and is going to pull away. And I don't think Mariota is necessarily that quarterback either. So it's something that I think we're going to have a close game. The Vegas sees it the same way, or they're talking 3.5 points. That I think that we're going to see something that's competitive, something that's going to be close. And then, like always, we need a couple things to break our way. We need a few things here or there. I actually think that we are projected to be the lowest scoring game of the entire week. They had the only game under 40 points. So they have us projected at 39. So, they're looking at something where I think that 18-21, I think is what they're projecting basically. So when you're talking about a game like that, if we get a big play here or there, something like Ryan Lewis's pick six that he dropped, if we get one of those big plays, we break a return here or there, Ray gets loose on something, all of a sudden we have something, another set of a strip sack fumble that we had with Jerry Hughes. We're going to need some of those things when we win games. Those are the things we're going to look back on and see that it wasn't a bunch of sustained 12-play, 80-yard drives to score. It's going to be some big plays, and I think that they're the kind of team that has given some of those things up here or there when they've dug some of their holes in some of these games. So I think it's certainly feasible. I don't see them pulling away and blowing us out. I see it being a competitive game, and that I think, I think I said when we were talking earlier, if these two teams played 10 times, I think the Titans win 6 and the Bills win 4. So I think we can certainly have one of those games come up on Sunday.
You talked me into it. I think they're going to win. No, I think Vegas is dead on the money. For me, my prediction has been right around, I was kind of in my mind, 13-10 Titans. So I'm right there. I think it's going to be not a pretty game for a lot of fans to watch. I don't think the NFL is going to be happy with the outcome of this game since they want 30-plus points per team. But I think it's going to be a battle. I think it's going to come down to a defensive battle, and whoever gets 2 to 3 plays to break their way is going to end up winning this game. For predictions, what do you got?
I'm going to go Tennessee 17, Buffalo 12. I think that we see some field goals. I think, that we just don't have the weapons. I hope that Shady breaks one, but that's about our only shot here. I think they play safe defense to keep people in front of them. They make tackles. I think that we can move the ball a little bit, but maybe we break down a little in the red zone. So I'm predicting a handful of field goals, and that probably have it close and maybe even right there. And then maybe Derrick Henry does break one of those big ones towards the end. So I'm going to call 17-12 Titans.
Okay. And one thing as I was getting ready for this game, and I think you had said it too a little bit, Titans fans after this 3-1 start are very hot on the potential for this team. If any Titans fans are listening, not that we want to get down on the other team or anything like that, but do you think this is a team in the AFC? Obviously, they're leading in their division right now, but the Jaguars are still in that division. Do you think this is a team that is really primed to make a run in the AFC this year where no one's established dominance yet?
Well, the second part of your sentence means it's possible. They do have a solid team. They haven't whiffed on draft picks. That's the biggest thing, is they've hit solid singles and ground rule doubles on a lot of their draft picks who are at least contributing. So they have a solid, deep team. I actually think they have a really good coach. I think that Mike Vrabel is a good up-and-coming coach and someone that I respect on a similar trajectory to McDermott. So a lot of their podcasts, they were talking about not getting respect as one of the best teams in the NFL. I'm not ready to go that far. They're not on that level with even in the AFC, where you're talking about the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Steelers, even the Chargers, some of those teams. I think they're a solid notch behind those teams. But they have you saw the Jaguars last year. They have the model that I guess they could go on a run in the playoffs if things broke right. I'm not sure they're even going to make the playoffs, but 3-1 starts great. They all 2 of those wins are in conference in division wins, so that's a great start. But no, I don't see them as one of the best teams in the league. I don't see them as someone who's ready to make a Super Bowl run, but I think that when you have a good defense, solid depth, a good offensive line, and a good coach, you're going to pull out some of those ugly wins like Buffalo did last year. Buffalo didn't deserve all the wins that we got last year, but we played tough. We had good coaching. Things broke our way, and we won those games. I could certainly see that same kind of 9-7, 10-6 wild card team, or winning an ugly division. I think that that's in the cards for a team like Tennessee. They have a good team. It's probably not quite as good as what their fans think, but it's a good team.
Yeah, I right now consider them a wild card competing team, and I think that's a good place to be for where they're at in their, for lack of a better term, where they're at in their process, building that organization up. I think that's a good place to be, and I think that's a good measuring stick for the Bills coming off of a tough stretch in that first month to go up against a team that is probably a playoff contender, by most counts considered a playoff contender. So even if you come in and you lose by a few points, but you hang with them and you really duke it out, I think that's a good sign for the competitive nature of this team. It might give the fans at least something to say, hey, well, we didn't get blown out by another team again. So speaking of process here, before I let you go, hot topic here in Buffalo. I'm sorry for any Tennessee fans listening, but here's a hot topic today in Buffalo. Sean McDermott gets on the mic again and just blows the media's minds with some of the comments that he makes here. Specifically, one of the comments that was made was him saying that the culture trumps strategy. That can you enlighten some people about what he meant? Because I think that the majority of people took that entirely the wrong way. And that doesn't really stray from the message that he's been saying since day one in his first press conference.
That's what drove me nuts. I spent a while today trying to help people understand this and had to give up eventually. So there are two big things. So one, it was in response to a specific question on when you are challenged with players that you think may not be a fit, when do you know when to pull the cord? So he went down the line of, well, that's always difficult. We're trying to build something here. And that then he goes into, and I feel that culture trumps strategy. So what he's saying there is he'd rather have the right guys while we're trying to build this, and that, there's kind of some art versus science there, that you just kind of have to trust your gut to know whether those are the right people. So, and he also said that it trumps it, not that it's the only thing. That's what drove me crazy, is he didn't say that we don't believe in strategy. It's all culture, and that's all that matters. He just said that that's going to be a priority for them because they think that's more sustainable over time, that you're going to be able to build a more consistent winning team when everybody's on the same page. You get the right kind of people. They talk about, that love football. They don't have to be choir boys. They don't, they're okay with people who are tough and have maybe learned some from mistakes in their past, but that they're bought in, and you have those gym rat, crazy workout warrior kind of people that want to be engaged and part of the team all the time. That's what they're always going to gravitate towards. Now, I think people held on to the fact of, oh, well, he's saying that strategy doesn't matter and we don't need to be innovative. And it's just crazy to apply those kind of presumptions to what he said when that's not what he talked about. That's not what the context of his statement was. And that he was simply answering a question the way that it was asked. But when you're losing and when you have a frustrated, hungry fan base, they're going to cling on to anything that he says and run with it. So it's impossible to help clarify for those people, and plenty are going to try to hear what they want, but it's, it is what it is.
Yeah. So I agree with everything you said. My prior problem is, and I'm getting in a little bit of trouble for this, I think it was very unfair and totally biased of the media to push the narrative on a slow day, slow week wise, to really push that narrative out to fans, because I think that they really, kind of molded how that conversation went today with the fans by putting it out there with no context, reacting to it without the context being applied to it. We know that people have an issue with context a lot of these times, but and to kind of add to what you were saying, I think that the comment he was making was specifically about right now with the young players that they have in this building, as far as the core players, your quarterback, defensive back, middle linebacker. Those guys need to learn from some of the vets that they have in place that may not be strategic fits at their positions for what they're trying to do long term, but they're going to keep those guys around because that they are helping those younger players build the foundation of what it takes to be a player in the NFL, what it takes to win in the NFL. And that isn't, like you said, it doesn't matter. They just signed a guy that swore at his coaches on the weekend, and some of the media said, well, I thought it was about culture. And that isn't the culture. The culture is Monday morning watching film on the next team, breaking down the film, self-evaluation. What do you do every day when you come into work? How do you work when you're here? Are you utilizing your time? How do you watch film? Those are the culture fits that I think McDermott is talking about, is being a winner every single day, whether it's on the field, off the field, in practice. And that, to me, is what he meant when he said culture trumps talent, is building that foundation for the youth movement that they're trying to bring in, so that these leaders like Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds can then teach that as they build this team out.
I can't think of a better singular example than Lorenzo Alexander. Lorenzo Alexander is the exact kind of player that he's talking about on twofold. One, you have a player that worked his way up through special teams, never really got a chance, finally got an opening here, busted out, and then became a locker room leader to really buy in at an advanced age. Also, you have it from a front office standpoint. He is 35. He is expensive. We're paying him more than what more than what he would have gotten on the open market. And I won't use the T word, a rebuilding team who doesn't want to concentrate on wins would have simply released him and let him go. But that's not what they're trying to do. They are trying to build a culture and show through example and by his actions what they want their young players to do, to learn, and to build from. And having a guy like Lorenzo Alexander is that culture. Now, obviously, you have your Kyle Williams. I'll even say on the other side of the ball, Andre Holmes is one of those players, where having that veteran, hardworking, talented player is there. I think you saw it in their free agent acquisitions. We spent a lot of money that people beleaguer all the time with both Trent Murphy and Star Latuile. Those are players who are really hardworking, not selfish players, always invested in working out and making themselves the best that they can, and are not going to be the malcontent players looking for their own stats. And that, granted, maybe that isn't where you want to see them spend $17 million a year or whatever it is, but that's the kind of culture that they're trying to build, and kind of fits that they want in their locker room, as now they go and next year have a ton of cap room and 10 draft picks. When you're bringing in those young players and bringing in more free agents, those are the people you want in your locker room. Those are the leaders that you want in their locker room to be able to emulate and to be able to grow and to be able to want to strive to become. So I think that those are examples of the culture he's speaking about, and that, yes, we need innovation. We need a smart defensive plan. We need players who can probably execute more of what Daboll has in mind on the strategic side of it. But I think you touched on it exactly. It's not culture in that we want a bunch of choir boys. It's culture in that having the right people at the right positions.
It's talent plus habits. He has not. It really is, though. I mean, everybody chalks up all the stuff he says as coach speak. But he's not lying. He's been consistent, and I don't understand how these things become a surprise to anyone when he says them, and they just lose their minds, because it's consistent with if you go back, watch anyone that's upset about this, go back, watch his first press conference and listen to the things he said there. They're different words, but the message rings the same, and he's had that message consistently throughout, where it's in a tough time for Bills fans. So obviously those messages are falling on deaf ears, but I urge you to just understand where they're coming from, and they are going to do this the way that they sought out to do this from his first day. They're not going to change that path, and I don't blame them. If you believe that you have a mission and you can see the forest through the trees, continue on that mission and don't care about what the fan base says. Just continue sludge through it, and then when we come out the other side, it may not be pretty, but it may be exactly what they planned the entire time. I'm down for the ride, man. At this point, sign me up for it. I think somewhere in the middle of 2019, I'll have a better idea of, is this actually working? Where are you with the process, the rebuild? We won't use the T word. Where are you there?
I absolutely am on board. This is exactly what they lined out. We said it lots of times today. They are early in year 2 of a 5-year plan. It is legitimately a 5-year plan. Eric goes through all the time. I wouldn't be shocked if right now Sean McDermott has something written down for what he plans to do in November of year 4. He is a meticulous planner. He is incredibly detailed. Now, he's not perfect. There are going to be mistakes. There have been some mistakes, but it is not done. Mistakes do not come by accident. Mistakes do not come from a lack of preparation. Mistakes do not come from a lack of engagement in what this process is. And you've said it many, many times. He has told us everything here. All we have to do is believe him. He has gone through and explained this is going to be tough. We are early in a build. There's going to be a lot of lessons learned. I think he was even a little bit more transparent and honest this week in some of the press conferences, talking about the challenges of what we've had here, the fact that we have to learn from these things, the fact that what we're seeing is not acceptable. There's going to be a lot more of that this year. We have players on this roster right now who are not going to be long-term fits here. We have things that are not going to be what we need to be the successful team we are going forward, but we have the assets to go acquire those pieces next year and in 2020. So it's something that we have to be patient. There's going to be a leap of faith. It is not going to have early great results to make us feel better about what's happening immediately, but it's going to be finding development in those young pieces. We've already seen great progress from Taron Johnson. We've already seen huge improvements from Tremaine Edmonds. We've seen some flash plays from Saran Neal. We're now counting Matt Milano as a core piece going forward. Harrison Phillips has looked great. We're seeing a lot of those young investments turn out to be solid players that we can count on. It looks like right now we might have our starting number 1 corner and our nickel corner for the next 4 or 5 years. If we have Tre'Davious White and Taron Johnson, that's 2 of our 3 starting corner spots that we're going to be able to count on. Those are the kind of things we can use.
I think Trey White, and I said it earlier, I doubled down on a prediction I made in one of the earlier episodes here this offseason, that I have Tremaine Edmonds as a generational talent at the linebacker position, and maybe the kind of guy that changes the way they look at the middle linebacker position as far as athleticism at that position. I think he's a generational guy, and I think him and Trey White have the potential to be all-pro players multiple years in their career, which is very scary and is a good part of the process. When people say these guys don't know how to evaluate talent, I point right to those 2 guys, because I really think that those 2 guys have the potential to be all pro level players.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we have some huge pieces that we can feel good about. And that I hope for all the people that question, but do we trust this front office to make these choices with the $90 million in cap space and the 10 draft picks? Look at some of those choices. We have made good decisions. We have gotten production and value from a lot of our draft picks. And I think that should give a lot of confidence in the people to make those choices going forward.
Yeah, they've been buying polo shirts at Goodwill, essentially, in free agency, and I have no problem with that. They've done a good job. But anyway, we could talk about this. I know you could talk about this all night. I could talk about this all night. You know where we probably will be talking about this all night is the Slack channel. Cover1.net. Yep. Come over to cover1.net. If you want to talk to fans, like Greg was saying earlier, if you want to talk to fans that are just engaged, aren't looking to push narratives, aren't just out there looking for an argument, but want to engage, learn from each other. People come in with questions all the time. Hey, I'm seeing this. Does this make sense? I think I hate to say it, it's kind of a safe space for that type of stuff. And to have those conversations outside of Twitter where it's just attack. Cover1.net, go sign up, get a premium membership. It's $25 for the whole year, and you get access to tons of premium content, the Slack channel. Eric does some special film breakdown stuff just for the premium members. It's really a deal that you can't pass up on. Greg, where can the beautiful people watching us find you in your business attire?
Come find me on Twitter at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. You can see me vainly trying to explain things to people and frustrating and banging my head against the computer. Come and join me. Love to interact. Follow back Bills fans and have a good time.
Yeah, you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716. You can usually find me liking Greg's stuff, kind of adding my own little wit to his comments and stuff. No, I do my own thing too over there. But you can find me over there. I'm willing to follow back, talk to any Bills fans. I really enjoy the engagement that's over there as well. One thing, Greg, here before we wrap up, I know we're running on a little late. The one thing I hate about this game coming up, that we don't play the Titans that much, but I hate every time we play them, and I'm hoping that it's not as much now that the drought has ended, is I know that there's going to be a bunch of knuckleheads in CBS suits talking about the Music City Miracle and the highlights of the Music City Miracle. Do you ever think there's going to be a time where we play the Titans where they don't bring it up? Or is that just forever?
I'll just lie and say yes. No, it's going to be the leading intro into the game. It's going to be the first thing that they show. It is what it is.
It's my worst. I dread this week because I just have to sit through that for 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's the most celebrated forward lateral in history. It is what it is. I can't even hope that it's not going to be shown. It's like, when we have home games, it's like not showing an overhead view of Niagara Falls and a bowl of wings. Like those are apparently the only things that happen in Buffalo. So that's all you.
Besides making babies, right?
Yes, yes, we do make a lot of babies. That's true.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, we appreciate you coming out tonight. For everybody that tuned in live on YouTube stream, we appreciate it. The chat box is going. If you're listening on the podcast, don't forget you can head over to YouTube, subscribe over there, click the little notifications bell. You'll get a notification every time we go live on this show. We do it Wednesdays as a matchup show, looking ahead at the opponent coming up that Sunday. And then Sundays after the 4:00 games, you'll see Greg and I with our immediate reactions to the game, talking about it. So come on in, join the chat box if you're here listening on the podcast. But and if you're here on YouTube, make sure you go over and subscribe on the podcast. A little vice versa. You get your podcast, whether you're running on the treadmill or as our friend Garrett is always sitting in the sauna listening to us. You can take us wherever you are and listen. So make sure you subscribe to everywhere we are. Follow us on all the social medias, and we will be back to talk to you guys after this game, and hopefully some of our predictions hold true and they have a really good game here this weekend, and we don't have to come on after another Bills blowout loss. So thanks guys for following us, and we look forward to talking with you next time. Thanks.